So today we're going to review for the Unit 6 test. It's live, fresh footage, raw footage in the classroom. Trying to switch it up. Alright, it's probably going to be a disaster, but we're just going to roll with it. Okay, so settling the West. This is chapters 16 through 20. So what two things brought people out west?
Cheap land.
Cheap land with the Homestead Act and the railroads. So you've got the available land with the Homestead Act, and then remember railroads either brought people out there or the fact that they were there made people feel comfortable. You know, you can leave, you can travel, you can get goods shifted on the railroads. Well, that inevitably brings contacts with your Native Americans, and so we know the story. Basically, we conquer them through military conquest, and you don't need to know the big battles like Wounded Knee or Battle of Little Bighorn, but just in general, they're conquered through military conquest, and then they will submit to the reservations. So with the reservations, we get the Dawes Act, and remember this was for assimilation, and assimilation is, their slogan was kill the Indian, save the man, right? So create a kind of average American person where they speak English, they're Christian, they wear the American clothes, they're farmers, right? And they are just like all the other average Americans. And so that's the goal of the Dawes Act. Now, what did they do to the tribes? What did the Dawes Act do?
Break them up.
Okay, they break up the tribes. The biggest way was tribes could not own land. So you can't have tribal or community ownership of land. It's just each American Indian family had 160 acres, just like the Homestead Act. And so your nuclear small family had land, and the tribe pretty much ceased to exist. Moving on to our Gilded Age, we've got poor working conditions. So, of course, a lot of those poor conditions, long hours, low pay, harmful conditions, right? Unsafe factory machines, pollution. Okay, so who wants to do something about these problems?
Middle class.
Good, your middle class. So your progressives are your middle class, especially the women, and they want to reform these poor conditions. Let me skip back to, I miss social Darwinism. So social Darwinism is the justification for why it's okay to have long hours, low pay, unskilled workers, because according to social Darwinism, those are the unfit people, right? They're not the smartest, fastest, most capable people, so that's where they belong, at those bad jobs, and hopefully evolution will get rid of them. Of course, we don't believe in that today. It's not nice, but that was one of the theories. Okay, so that takes us to the progressive, especially the middle class women, and this is a big concept. If you know this, you're going to get multiple questions right on the test. They want the government to do something about it. They want the government to reform and intervene in the economy or whatever is wrong. Does that make sense? So the government. Okay, skip to Booker T. Washington. So remember he said, we got to make the best of it. Get a good education. Don't be an unskilled worker. Try to be a skilled worker. Get a trade or a craft. Be a machinist, a carpenter. Don't be the guy who screws the cap on the tube of toothpaste. But try to have. We're going to make our way that way, and eventually we'll get equality. Whereas W.E.B. Du Bois is like, no, we need equality now. Like, let's fight for that now. But Washington will be more so on the test than Du Bois. And remember, just kind of trying to make the best of it. Okay, so of course, big problems will be segregation. What's the court case that said segregation is legal?
Plessy versus Ferguson.
Good, Plessy versus Ferguson. And so now it's legal, it's going to keep happening. And so those are some of the things they'll be fighting. Oh, New South. Anybody remember the New South?
The New South is basically industrialized.
Okay, good. So the South is industrialized, and this is what Booker T. Washington, the time frame he's living in. And so he's like, well, with all the new industry, we don't have to be sharecroppers. There are some opportunities if we can be those skilled craftsmen. And so that's kind of leading him, his philosophies. Okay. All right, back to our progressives. Okay, so government regulation of corporations or regulation of the economy, that's one of the big concepts that, that the progressives will be promoting. And on this test, it's really general, but for your essay, you would want to know specific examples, like Clayton Antitrust Act, ICC, Hepburn, but we'll talk about that for the essay. Okay, immigrants. Of course, immigrants, right, they're from Southeastern Europe. Remember, they're hard to assimilate, and they're going to end up with some of the worst jobs, right, lowest pay, longest hours. And so if you think of that photo from Jacob Reese, you know, there's 10 guys packed into one, you know, one small apartment, typically had some of the harder lives, something kind of general about that. So that's pretty much the gist for our immigrants. All right, conservation of the environment. So remember, we've got a lot of mining, coal mining, right? We had a couple coal strikes. I'm not sure, I don't think they quite had this technique back then, but something more recent that environmentalists have complained about is when they mine for coal, you've got your nice mountaintop, they just blow the top off the mountain and it's flat. And so, you know, the coal mining especially ruins the environment. They gotta cut down trees, you know, they ruin the rocks, they cave in, and pollute the river. So of course we wanna clean that up, right? And there's a lot of exploitation of resources, you know, just cutting down all the trees when, oh, you could leave some trees up. And so we know Teddy Roosevelt, he loves the outdoors and hunting and the parks. And so the other thing is, who should preserve the environment?
Government.
The government, good. Okay, railroads. Who hated the railroads the most? Farmers, good. Farmers and the populace, right? So they hate the railroad the most, right? Farmers, of course. Somehow they always got charged the highest rates, you know, they always kind of got the short end of the bargain on that one. But in general, do we think railroads are bad?
No.
I mean,
Some self-service to keep that one up.
Yeah, so there's some good things to railroads. They transport people across the country, they connect the East Coast, West Coast. Big thing is they open up new markets. Now we can sell products to the Great Plains because the railroad goes there, or you can sell a product from New York in San Francisco. So for the economy, railroads are really good, and they open up those new markets. But farmers or whoever gets charged the worst rates, they're not going to like them. They had some corrupt practices. So keep that in mind. Jacob Reese, again, remember one of the muckrakers, right, the yellow journalists, digging up the dirt, but hoping to get reforms out of that. So you'll have one of his pictures. Remember maybe the kids on the grate trying to stay warm, or immigrants, or the slums, right? So you'll have a picture of, obviously something about the progressive movement, but so of course he's a muckraker, and all of the muckrakers are trying to make changes. And settlement houses. Okay, who founded the first settlement house? Okay, Jane Addams, right, with Hull House. And so it's our first social work, and they initially started with English classes for the immigrants, and a little bit of help of how to get a job, how to do this or that, and then it'll expand to even having some temporarily, homeless shelters, to soup kitchens, to cultural activities, daycare for the moms so they can work or, get things done during the day. And this would be an example of which philosophy? Good, social gospel, yeah. Okay, farmers and Mary Elizabeth Lease. Okay, a lot on farmers. Remember Mary Elizabeth Lease? Her slogan was raise less corn and more hell. So I'm going to have another quote from her. It won't be that exact one. But she'll kind of talk about the problems with the farmers, which are the same things that the populists want. They want the railroads regulated, public ownership or regulation of utilities, the direct election of senators, that one we get. Which amendment is that?
17.
17, good. And there's something else. What do they want to do with the money?
Loosen it.
Okay, loosen it, or inflation and silver standard. Yeah, remember, so inflation helps people in debt pay off their bills. populist, pretty much those are all same things that the populists want. Gospel of wealth. So Carnegie writes the Gospel of Wealth, and this is where he's really justifying why it's okay to have mega rich people when there's so many really poor people. Remember, the gap between the rich and poor is really growing at this time. But he says, look, it's okay that I'm rich because I'm a good role model. I'm responsible with my money. I don't waste it, and I donate it, right? Philanthropy was a big thing. And the Gospel of Wealth, they would donate to schools. Think of Vanderbilt University, Carnegie Mellon, Carnegie Hall, Rockefeller Center. So they donate to those kind of big community things. But are they like really helping the poor? Not so much. It's not really trickling down to them. But that's the justification. Now, how did we get these mega rich people? What kind of companies did they own? Trust. So I heard vertical alignment, yeah, but like your trust, your monopolies, right? And so that's how you get the mega rich people. You know, Rockefeller owned 90% of the country's oil. How you get mega rich, right? So try to think about that. Okay, last one. Oh, social gospel. So we've got all of our gospels: Gospel of Wealth, social Darwinism, and social gospel. And social gospel was the Christian intellectual movement, the idea that the churches should help the poor. So with that, you get the YMCA, Salvation Army. This is where you get the soup kitchens, coat drives,